Welcome to the Deep Dive Learner. So here's a deeply frustrating truth about the human brain.
Oh, there's so many of those.
Right. But specifically, I mean, the fact that it rewards you with the exact same hit of dopamine for just imagining a brilliant new plan as it does for, actually finishing one.
Yeah, that neurochemical loophole is exactly why so many of us have a notebook full of half-finished projects.
Or like a dozen browser tabs open for a hobby you haven't actually started yet. We get so high on the revelation, but we completely stall out on the execution.
It's the ultimate cognitive trap. I mean, the rush of a new idea feels so productive, so transformative, that we mistake that spark of inspiration for the actual work of building the fire.
Exactly. And so the question becomes, what happens when the spark fades? What do you do on the morning after the fireworks when the adrenaline is gone and you just have to grab a broom, sweep up the debris, and build something that is actually going to last?
And that transition is really our entire mission today.
It is. We are looking at a fascinating set of sources today from Tarot by HIC. That's HIC.net. We have an astrology of the day forecast for May 2nd, 2026, and a companion narrative piece, a StoryScope centered around a full moon in Scorpio.
And I think it's worth noting right away that even if you don't track planetary movements, these sources operate as an incredibly sharp psychological blueprint.
Totally.
They offer this framework for cutting through mental clutter and shifting out of that dopamine-driven brainstorming phase. The astrology forecast details a very specific transit, which is Mercury moving into the sign of Taurus, running from May 2nd through May 17th.
Okay, so what's the core message there?
Well, the defining mandate the text provides for this period is moving, quote, from revelation into application.
From revelation into application, I love that. The idea guy basically has to become the execution guy.
Right, exactly.
Now, the source describes how this shift fundamentally alters our thought processes. Because Mercury represents the mind and communication, and Chorus is earth energy. It's the archetype of the builder.
Yes, it's not about the flash of lightning. It is about the break in the mortar.
Yeah. And the text says our thoughts become slower, much more grounded. The mind suddenly rejects multitasking and prefers to focus on one thing at a time, like a budget, a timeline, or a straight answer.
It is a period that really demands proof over promise. The source even notes that you might find yourself craving conversations with people who don't treat accountability like a personal attack.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's this sudden, intense hunger for structural integrity in a world that, frankly, usually rewards noise.
Okay, let's unpack this, though, because I do struggle with this concept a bit.
How so?
Well, when someone tells me to deliberately slow down my mental processing in a market and a culture that is this fast, my immediate reaction is just panic.
Sure, that makes sense.
I mean, my inbox is overflowing. The sheer volume of information you and I and the listener have to process every single day is staggering. So, slower feels like a recipe for getting completely left behind. Why is slower being framed as an advantage here? Convince me that moving slower right now isn't just, professional suicide.
What's fascinating here is that it comes down to understanding the mechanics of how we actually make progress. We so often confuse speed with velocity.
Okay, speed versus velocity.
Right, speed is just distance over time. You can run in a circle incredibly fast and go absolutely nowhere. Velocity, on the other hand, requires a specific direction.
Ah, I see.
And the source directly addresses this modern anxiety. It warns us to recalibrate our value system during this shift, stating that we should be, quote, less interested in who reacted fastest and more interested in what can actually be trusted.
So it is essentially asking us to trade speed for torque, like you drop into a lower gear so you can actually pull the heavy load up the hill.
Precisely. Because fast cognitive processing often leads to shallow execution. When we slow down, we are redirecting our mental energy toward evaluating structural integrity.
Right.
The text urges us to rely on common sense, to demand consistency, and it explicitly tells us to avoid, and I love this phrase, dramatic speeches from people with no follow-through.
Because dramatic speeches are just another form of speed without velocity.
Exactly.
But the source does offer some important guardrails here, which we should mention. It tells us to watch out for rigid thinking. The goal isn't to become so stubborn and practical that you develop a resistance to all new ideas.
Right, it's not about becoming a brick wall.
Exactly. The goal is to let go of the frantic mental spinning, that overthinking, so we can trust our innate wisdom and access a deeper focus on financial planning, stability, and tangible results.
And that warning against dramatic speeches is actually the critical thread that connects the astrological forecast to our second source.
Oh, how
Well,
so?
because we don't just endure dramatic speeches from colleagues or politicians, we deliver them to ourselves.
Oh man, that is so true.
Our internal monologue is full of them. We hype ourselves up with grand, complex strategies, promising that this time we are going to revolutionize our lives, only to abandon the entire framework a few days later.
Which brings us directly to Elias.
Yes, Elias.
Elias is the central character in the StoryScope narrative titled What Will Hold, which tracks a full moon in Scorpio. Now, this moon phase represents the illumination of hidden truths and the stripping away of the superficial.
And Elias is a guy who desperately needs to strip away the
Yeah.
superficial.
Oh, completely. Because when we meet him, he's drowning in his own internal dramatic speeches.
The narrative introduces his epiphany with this perfectly mundane detail. They contrast so sharply with the chaos in his head.
Right, it wasn't some grand moment.
No. The text says Elias's revelation didn't arrive like thunder. It came quietly, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, right as the kettle clicked off and no one was watching.
I love that imagery. Because for weeks leading up to that moment, he had been trapped in a cycle of endless conceptualizing. He had been circling ideas, layering plans upon plans.
It sounds exhausting.
It really does. Every single iteration was more elaborate than the last, and he abandoned every single one halfway through to chase something that was newer, sharper, and louder. So what does this all mean?
Wow.
Actually, let me throw an analogy out there. Elias is basically treating productivity like a sugar rush. He is treating his brain like a computer with 50 browser tabs open. He thinks having all those tabs open means he is doing intense, high-level research, but really, he is just draining his RAM so fast that his operating system can't actually process a single page.
That is a perfect way to look at it. He is completely addicted to the neurobiology of novelty. Starting a new project gives him that dopamine spike we talked about earlier.
But the middle of a project, the actual execution, is a total slog.
Right, the dopamine drops. So instead of pushing through the friction, he just opens a new tab. He starts a new plan to get a fresh hit. And the source points out the tragedy of this cycle, saying, quote, "It had felt productive, that constant motion. It had felt like intelligence. Now it felt like noise."
He was mistaking friction for forward momentum, but then, the kettle clicks. Elias is standing in his kitchen, holding a mug he completely forgot to fill with water.
Such a relatable moment.
It is, and he is staring down at a notebook on his table. The text describes it as a scattering of arrows leading nowhere, with phrases underlined twice, as if adding emphasis could somehow compensate for a total lack of substance.
It never does.
Nope. And looking at that chaotic mess, Elias asks the ultimate grounding question out loud to an empty room. What actually works?
What actually works? I mean, that question is the scalpel. Asking it is easy, but actually demanding an answer from yourself is deeply unsettling.
Yeah, why is that?
Because it forces you to confront the reality that the truth of what works is often incredibly boring.
We see that struggle immediately in the text. Elias sits down, the chair creaks. He turns to a blank page and he writes a single word, plan.
Just plan.
Just plan. And the source notes his visceral reaction to this. He has an overwhelming urge to decorate the word. He wants to surround it with contingencies, sweeping visions, grand declarations.
He's fighting his own addiction right there.
Physically fighting his own addiction to complexity, he tries to write step 1, stops himself, shakes his head and mutters, "No, not steps. What's the point?"
He recognizes that creating a massive 12-step master plan is just him engaging in performance art again.
Right.
The question, what actually works,
Yeah.
does not care about a beautiful layout. It simply demands an answer. So he tries again, and he writes down 3 core anchors.
Yeah.
Income, expenses, time.
Income, expenses, time. I mean, he stripped the ego away completely. It does not get more fundamental than that. You cannot out-innovate a lack of capital or a lack of hours in the day.
Absolutely. And notice how this perfectly mirrors the mandate of Mercury in Taurus from our first source. The astrological forecast explicitly called for a focus on financial planning and tangible results.
Oh, that's a great connection.
Yeah, Elias is grounding his abstract anxieties into the physical physics of his reality.
Yet, Elias doesn't feel a sense of triumph in this moment, which is interesting. The text points out that these words looked almost insultingly plain to him. There was no clever phrasing to hide behind.
He feels let down by it.
He feels so disappointed. He thinks to himself that straight roads do not promise transformation. And this highlights something so pervasive in our culture. Why do we hate the basics? Why does a straight, clear road feel like a letdown?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the complexity bias at work, and that's driven by our threat response.
Oh, wait, our threat response, how does that factor in?
Well, when we are highly anxious about our careers or our lives, our brain's amygdala fires up, signaling danger. We feel this massive, complicated sense of overwhelm, so we subconsciously assume the cure must be equally massive and complicated to take the threat seriously.
Oh, wow.
Right. A simple answer like track your income and time just doesn't require enough cognitive effort to soothe that hyperactive threat response. We invent complex spreadsheets and labyrinthine strategies just to burn off the anxiety.
So we want our solutions to be as complex as our anxieties. If it's simple, we feel like it isn't doing enough work. Elias was expecting to build a labyrinth. When he found a straight road, he resisted it because straight roads are dull.
But then the text gives us his crucial realization. Straight roads might be dull, but they actually lead somewhere.
Bad.
Labyrinths just keep you trapped in the illusion of movement.
So he commits to the straight road. He starts showing up every single morning at that same table with that same notebook. He doesn't write a manifesto. He doesn't announce a rebrand on social media.
No dramatic speeches.
None. He just adds a number, a date, a decision. And when that familiar anxiety creeps back in, he doesn't chase it into abstraction. He lets it sit. And he filters it through quieter, much more demanding questions from the source. Things like, can I prove this? Will this hold? Is this necessary?
Those three questions are the ultimate antidote to the dramatic speeches. But, and this is where it shifts, as the narrative progresses, it takes this highly internal, solitary revelation out of the kitchen and drops it into a highly volatile environment.
The modern workplace.
Exactly.
Yes, applying this grounded energy in private is one thing. Trying to survive with it in a corporate culture that constantly demands the appearance of urgency is an entirely different battle.
It really is.
The source describes Elias's history at his job. He was known as the idea guy, brilliant, incredibly fast, and almost always unfinished. He treated meetings as a stage. He spoke with such intensity that he left his colleagues constantly scrambling just to keep pace with him.
He was the primary source of the chaotic fireworks in his office. But post-revelation, Elias operates completely differently. The text notes he speaks less. When he does speak, he leaves long pauses that stretch just long enough to make everyone else in the room acutely uncomfortable.
I can just picture that awkward silence.
Right. And when he offers solutions, they are stripped down. He tells them, it won't look impressive, but it will work.
Here's where it gets really interesting. His colleagues have absolutely no idea what to do with him. The text shows how they completely misinterpret his new discipline. At first, they think he's hesitating. Then they assume he's become disinterested or lazy.
Because in a hustle culture, if you aren't visibly sweating and speaking in exclamation points, people assume you aren't working.
Exactly. But you cannot argue with gravity. The results begin to speak for themselves. The projects Elias touches begin to stabilize. Deadlines that used to slip are met. Budgets hold firm. Issues that used to be inflated into massive, panic-inducing crises by the team's collective anxiety are reduced to just being everyday, solvable tasks.
He is literally embodying the shift from revelation into application.
Which brings us to the climax of the StoryScope. It takes place in a conference room during a meeting that the source beautifully identifies as veering dangerously close to becoming a theater of urgency.
Oh, we all know that meeting.
We've all been there. It's a meeting where everyone is performing how stressed and busy they are, rather than actually solving the problem.
Yes. And in the middle of this theater, his manager leans back and says, Elias, you're quiet today. Thoughts?
The spotlight is on him.
And Elias looks at the whiteboard at the front of the room. It is completely crowded with arrows, overlapping circles, and exclamation marks. It is a perfect external mirror of the chaotic notebook he had in his kitchen weeks ago.
He recognizes the exact pattern of restless expansion that used to trap him.
Exactly.
So Elias stands up, walks over to the whiteboard, picks up an eraser, and calmly wipes out half of it. He just erases the noise. Silence falls over the entire room. He turns around and says, "We don't need all of this. We need one clear path and the discipline to follow it."
It is a stunning moment of breaking the corporate social contract. And the reaction from his team is immediate. A colleague shifts in their chair, clearly threatened by the simplicity, and delivers what they think is the ultimate insult. They say, that's less ambitious.
Less ambitious. In the modern workplace, that is equivalent to a death sentence. It implies you don't care, that you aren't visionary.
But Elias doesn't flinch. He counters instantly with the line that really defines the entire narrative. He replies, it's more reliable, Which one do we actually need?
So good.
And no one answers him. They don't have to, because the truth of it is self-evident. That moment beautifully synthesizes the very first mandate we discussed from the Mercury and Taurus forecast: pick what is sustainable.
He proved to himself that slowing down doesn't mean fading into irrelevance. Elias had been terrified that without constant frantic motion, he would just disappear. But the text explicitly states the slower he moved, the clearer everything became.
Yeah.
It didn't make the work effortless, it didn't make the slog any less boring, but it made it clear.
And that really brings us to the core takeaway from both the Tarot by Heisey astrology forecast and the StoryScope. Whether you are using the planetary shift starting May 2nd as your timing, or you are simply applying this as a psychological framework to your life right now, the invitation is identical.
Which is to stop prioritizing speed and volume over structural integrity. We have to decouple our sense of self-worth from how complex our plans are.
We have to stop building plans that are beautiful and impressive just to get the applause of our colleagues or to soothe our own anxiety. A plan does not need to be a work of art. It needs to be functional.
Yes, functional. And functionality is exactly what delivers the true psychological reward. Because this raises an important question. How does Elias feel at the end of all this?
Well, at the very end of the narrative, Elias is back home. The workday is over. He opens his notebook on the kitchen table. The pages are no longer a chaotic mess of arrows. They hold numbers that make sense. They hold timelines that actually align with reality.
A huge difference.
Massive. The text explicitly tells us it was not beautiful. It was not impressive. But as Elias runs his hand over the paper, he feels a quiet, profound satisfaction settle in his chest. Because he can finally look at his own life and say, this will hold.
This will hold. I mean, it mattered so much more that the foundation was solid than it mattered to be right quickly or loudly or to seem ambitious. It mattered that it worked. That is the ultimate test.
Absolutely.
So, learner, think about the projects, the budgets, the career transitions, or even the personal goals you are currently juggling right now. Think about the things keeping you up at night, the things you're building complex labyrinths for in your own mind. If you were to walk up to the whiteboard of your own life today and take an eraser to everything that is just noise, everything that is just a performative, dramatic speech to yourself, what is the one clear path left behind? And maybe more importantly, what happens when you finally start performing your ambition and start anchoring it instead?
The fireworks are over. It is time to build.
The only question left is, wait, let me rephrase that without the dramatic pause. The only question left is, will it hold? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, learner. We will see you next time.